In a condominium tower in northeastern Miami-Dade, owners recently opened a letter that changed their lives. It was a special assessment, a one-time bill to repair their aging building, and for some units, the number was $400,000. That is not the price of the condo, that is the repair bill landing on top of it. And that single letter is a window into something quietly reshaping the entire Florida coastline right now. Across the state, condominium prices have fallen about 6.1% over the past year. There are now more than 13 months of condo supply sitting unsold on the market, more than double what a healthy, balanced market looks like. According to inventory tracking from Redfin and Florida Realtors, there are now more than 13 months of condo supply sitting unsold on the market, more than double what a healthy, balanced market looks like, and by early 2026, roughly 92% of Florida's major condo markets were in decline. But here is the part you have to understand because it is the key to this whole story, and almost no one explains it correctly. This is not the entire housing market falling apart. Single-family homes across most of Florida are holding up far better. This is a condo story, and it has exactly one cause. That cause is a law, and behind that law is a tragedy that must be treated with respect. In 2021, the Champlain Towers South Building in Surfside came down in the middle of the night, and 98 people lost their lives. In response, Florida passed a condominium safety law that finally forced the state's aging towers to confront decades of postponed maintenance all at once. It was the right thing to do. It was also financially brutal. And it is now reshaping the value of coastal condos in 10 specific Florida beach towns, which I am going to count down for you using the latest data from Zillow and Redfin, so you know exactly where the ground is shifting under your feet. So here is precisely how it works, because the mechanism is everything. After Surfside, Florida passed Senate Bill 4D in 2022. It required older buildings, generally those 3 stories and taller and 30 years and older, to complete milestone structural inspections and something called a structural integrity reserve study. And crucially, it ended a practice that had quietly hidden the danger for decades. For years, condo boards were allowed to vote to waive or underfund their reserves, the savings accounts meant to pay for the big repairs, the roofs, the concrete, the waterproofing. Keeping those reserves low kept the monthly dues low, which kept the buildings cheap and attractive to buyers. But it meant that when the repairs finally came due, there was no money set aside. The law ended that game for good. A follow-up bill, House Bill 913 in 2025, extended some deadlines and gave boards a little more flexibility in how to fund the work, but it did not lower the true cost by a single dollar. And now, the grace period has expired. Full reserve funding is mandatory. So decades of deferred maintenance arrived all at once, and the bill landed squarely on current owners either as sharply higher monthly dues or as a one-time special assessment. Those assessments now range from around $20,000 to well over $400,000 per unit, depending on the building. And to be clear and fair, this does not describe every condo. It is concentrated in certain older high-rise buildings that let their reserves run dry. But roughly 40% of Florida condo owners have been hit with an assessment in just the last 3 years. And when a retiree on a fixed income receives a 6-figure bill they simply cannot pay, they do the only thing they can. They sell. Multiply that across thousands of aging coastal buildings, and you get the flood of condo inventory now quietly dragging prices down. That is the villain. One law, one repair bill, one forced sale at a time. Now let us count down where it is hitting the hardest. Number 10 is Daytona Beach on the Atlantic coast. Zillow shows the typical home here has already fallen more than 8% over the past year, among the steepest slides in the state. Daytona's oceanfront is lined with older mid-rise condo buildings, many built in the 1960s and 70s, which makes them exactly the aging stock this reserve law was written for. Picture a retiree who bought a modest oceanfront unit years ago for the sunset views, living quietly on Social Security, who now opens a notice for a concrete and roof assessment that rivals an entire year of income. They cannot pay it, so the unit goes up for sale, and it joins dozens of others doing the same thing on the same stretch of beach. Daytona is where the reserve bill met the weakest demand. Redfin shows condos here sitting far longer than they did a year ago. And once a stretch of beach fills with forced listings all at once, every seller is competing against every neighbor, and the price only goes one direction. Daytona is where the reserve bill met the weakest demand. Number 9 is the Cape Coral and Fort Myers area, the epicenter of the Southwest Florida condo slide. Forecasters project condos in this region could fall between 8 and 15% from peak to trough. The problem here is who owned these units. A large share of Southwest Florida's coastal condos were bought as investments, especially short-term rental plays during the boom. Now those investors are getting hit from two sides at once. The special assessment lands, and at the same moment the rental income they counted on has softened. When the math stops working for an investor, they do not agonize, they list. And when investors list all together, in the same buildings in the same quarter, the inventory piles up fast. Southwest Florida is where the reserve crisis met a wall of investor owners heading for the exits. Zillow already shows values across this region among the fastest falling in the entire country. And Redfin has condos here taking months to sell, where they once moved in weeks. Southwest Florida is where the reserve crisis met a wall of investor owners heading for the exits. Number 8 is St. Pete Beach, on the Gulf Coast in Pinellas County. This is a classic beach condo market, gorgeous older low-rise and mid-rise buildings sitting right on the sand, and days on market here have been stretching longer and longer. Many of these Gulf front buildings are now completing their reserve studies and discovering exactly what everyone feared: concrete restoration, seawall work, and roof replacement, all needed at once, all requiring funding that was never set aside. St. Pete Beach is proof that this is not just a Miami problem. It runs coast to coast. Number 7 is Clearwater Beach, just up the Pinellas coastline, and it faces the same pressure with even more high-rise exposure. Clearwater's beachfront towers were built for a tourism economy, and many are now oversupplied as assessment-weary owners rush to list before the next bill arrives. When a building's reserve study comes back with a large funding gap, word travels fast among the owners, and the smart money tries to sell first, before the assessment is formally levied. That race for the exit is exactly what floods a market, and it is happening tower by tower along Clearwater Beach. Number 6 is Sarasota, further south on the Gulf. Sarasota's downtown and Barrier Island condos were some of the hottest properties in Florida during the boom, which means many were bought at peak prices by buyers who assumed values would only climb. Now the reserve law has arrived in those same buildings, and the combination of a high purchase price and a fresh, six-figure assessment is a very painful place to be. Sarasota shows how the sharpest pain often lands on the people who bought most recently, at the top, with the least cushion underneath them. Redfin data shows Sarasota condo listings climbing and days on market lengthening, the quiet fingerprints of a market where sellers now outnumber serious buyers. Sarasota shows how the sharpest pain often lands on the people who bought most recently, at the top, with the least cushion underneath them. If you have found this genuinely useful so far, and especially if you own a Florida condo or are thinking about buying one near the water, do me a quick favor and tap the like button, because it truly helps push this warning in front of other people before they sign on a building they have not researched. And the next few towns are where the assessments climb into truly staggering territory. Number 5 is the Naples and Marco Island area, which proves that not even wealth makes a building immune. These are some of the most expensive coastal condos in the entire state, and the luxury towers here are subject to the exact same reserve law as everyone else. Luxury condos in this market are now sitting on the market for 4 to 6 months and longer, with visible price cuts. And here is the twist. Wealthy owners can usually afford the assessment, but many of them simply choose not to pour a fresh 6 figures into an aging unit. They would rather sell and move on. So even at the top of the market, the reserve law is pushing supply up and prices down. Naples is where the assessment crisis reached the millionaires. Number 4 is West Palm Beach in Palm Beach County. This stretch of the Atlantic coast has documented case after case of owners forced to list, specifically because of assessment shock, older intracoastal and oceanfront buildings hit with bills their residents never saw coming. Palm Beach County also has one of the highest shares of cash buyers in the state, and that detail matters because it is quietly holding a floor under prices even as the forced sales pile up. West Palm Beach is where the assessment crisis is most clearly turning ordinary owners into reluctant, hurried sellers. Number 3 is Pompano Beach, part of the aging beachfront corridor of Broward County that stretches between Fort Lauderdale and Boca Raton. This corridor is wall-to-wall with older oceanfront condo buildings, precisely the age and type the reserve law targets most heavily. Pompano's beauty was always its established, mature beachfront, but established and mature is just another way of saying old. And old buildings are exactly the ones now facing the largest repair bills and the deepest reserve gaps. Pompano Beach is a full corridor of exposure, building after building, mile after mile. Number 2 is Fort Lauderdale itself, the heart of the Broward County condo slide. If you have stayed with me this far, you already understand this crisis better than almost any buyer walking into an open house this weekend, so stay for the final 2, because this is where the numbers stop being uncomfortable and start being staggering. Number 2 is Fort Lauderdale itself, the heart of the Broward County condo slide. This is where the supply data becomes almost shocking. Broward's condo segment now carries roughly 13 months of supply, which is firmly, deeply, in buyer's market territory, the highest level in many years. According to Redfin's inventory data, Broward's condo segment now carries close to 13 months of supply, which is firmly, deeply in buyer's market territory, the highest level in many years. While Zillow shows condo values across the county steadily giving ground. Special assessments across Broward's older buildings commonly run from $50,000 to well over $100,000 per unit. Sellers here have almost entirely lost their leverage, negotiating not just on price but on closing costs and credits, because buyers know they hold every card. Fort Lauderdale shows what it looks like when an entire county's condo market tips at once. And number 1, the epicenter of this entire story, is the cluster of aging high-rise towers across northeastern Miami-Dade and Miami Beach. This is where the assessments reach their most extreme. In one Aventura building, some owners were assessed up to $400,000 per unit. In a North Miami tower, the figure reached $134,000. Monthly homeowners association fees in Miami-Dade high-rises jumped by nearly $500 in a single year. This region holds the oldest, tallest oceanfront condo stock in Florida, and it is bearing the heaviest weight of the reserve law by far. Redfin shows condo inventory across these northeastern Miami-Dade markets, stacking up while sales slow to a crawl. And Zillow has values in the oldest buildings sliding hardest of all. Imagine a retiree who paid off their oceanfront condo years ago, who owes nothing, who did everything right, opening a certified letter demanding $400,000 within months. For most, there is no way to pay it, and no choice but to sell into a market already crowded with neighbors doing the very same thing. This is where the promise in the title fully arrives. This is the coastal crisis at its sharpest point. So there they are, 10 Florida beach towns and one single villain running underneath every one of them. Before I show you what this means for your own decision and the one honest fact that changes the whole picture, there is a resource worth knowing about if any of these towns is on your radar. I keep everything in one place, a single breakdown of 40 Florida towns, 20 that are genuinely worth buying into right now, and 20 worth staying well away from, each with the specific reason attached, including the condo and assessment risk we have just walked through. If you want to see which side of that line a town falls on before you ever make an offer, the link is waiting in the description. But stay right here, because the honest truth about how far this can actually fall is the single most important thing you will take away from this entire video. Here is that honest truth, and it matters, because your trust is worth more than a frightening story. This is a slide and a repricing. It is not a sudden downward spiral, and it is not the whole state. Two things are holding a real floor under this market. First, single-family homes across most of Florida are performing far better than condos. So if you own a house rather than an aging high-rise unit, very little of this touches you. This has always been a condo story, and specifically an older coastal condo story. Second, and just as important, cash buyers are everywhere in these markets. They make up roughly 37% of transactions in both Miami-Dade and Broward, and close to 45% in Palm Beach County. Those buyers do not need a mortgage. They are not scared off by a building's financing troubles, and they step in to buy at the lower prices, which stops the slide from turning into something worse. So this is a correction, a real one, concentrated in a specific and vulnerable slice of the market. It is not the whole sky falling, and there is one more piece of honesty worth adding. A well-run building that completed its inspection on time and fully funded its reserves is not in crisis at all. In fact, in this market, it has quietly become one of the safest things you can buy because its worst financial surprise is already behind it. The danger is not condos as a category. The danger is specifically the older buildings that spent decades pretending the repair bill would never come. Understand that one distinction, and you go from being a potential victim of this crisis to being one of the prepared buyers who quietly takes advantage of it. But the lesson for anyone buying or selling a Florida condo in 2026 could not be clearer. Before you sign anything on a building 3 stories or taller, you must see 3 documents: the reserve study, the last 2 years of budgets, and the full history of special assessments, both the ones already levied and any that are pending. A clean, fully funded building is now a genuine asset worth paying for. A building with an empty reserve account and a roof at the end of its life is a 6-figure bill waiting to land on whoever owns the unit when the letter arrives. The single most expensive mistake you can make in Florida right now is buying a beautiful old oceanfront condo without reading its financial future first. And here is a piece of good news buried in all of this. As of this year, Florida law now requires buildings with 25 or more units to post their financials, their reserve studies, and their inspection reports to an owner-accessible website. So the information you need to protect yourself is more available than it has ever been. The only unforgivable move is not looking. Now, I genuinely want to hear from you, because the comments on these are always the sharpest part. Do you own a Florida condo, and has your building hit you with an assessment or a jump in your dues? Drop the number below, the building's age and the size of the bill, because someone scrolling right now is deciding whether to buy in a tower just like yours, and your story will tell them more than any chart could. And if this helped you understand what is really happening to Florida's coast, hit the like button and subscribe, because these numbers move every quarter, and I would rather you hear the next warning from me than from a letter in your own mailbox, because that is exactly what is coming next. There is a second group of Florida coastal buildings where the reserve studies have not been completed yet, where the assessment has not landed yet, but where the deferred maintenance is already sitting there, waiting, quietly counting down. When those bills arrive, those owners will list all at once. So stay with this channel and we will name the coastal towns where the next wave of assessments is about to break before the letters ever go out.